Riven Varos had never been one for superstition or wild theories about the unknown. A man of science, he saw the universe as a vast, complex machine, governed by laws that could be unraveled with enough time and intelligence. The stars above, to him, were merely distant points of light, objects of study, data to be catalogued and understood. He often spent his nights perched in his observatory, mapping the celestial bodies and tracking the ever-shifting patterns of distant galaxies. It was a solitary existence, one that brought him peace in the quiet hum of scientific discovery. But all that changed one fateful night, a night when the sky itself seemed to rebel against reason. It was just past midnight when Riven noticed the anomaly. He was hunched over his desk, the faint blue light of his computer casting long shadows across the room. The data on his screen flickered for a moment, an odd blip in the cosmic background radiation. He paused, his brow furrowing. His fingers hovered over the keyboard as he analyzed the data. Nothing unusual, no reason for concern. Still, something in his gut told him to look up. He walked over to the large bay window, pushing the heavy curtains aside. The clear night sky stretched out before him, a canvas of stars and swirling nebulae. It was beautiful, as always, but tonight there was something different. A streak of brilliant silver light cut across the sky, too fast, too deliberate to be a shooting star. Riven's heart skipped a beat. His hand reached instinctively for the binoculars perched on the nearby table. Through the lens, he saw it, an object tumbling through the atmosphere. It was metallic, but not like any aircraft he had ever seen. Its surface shimmered, reflecting the starlight in a dazzling display of iridescent hues. The shape seemed to shift, as if the very structure of the object was warping under some unknown force. It was a craft, that much was clear, but its design defied all logic. Riven's mind raced as he scrambled for the nearest instrument, a sensor array that was supposed to measure cosmic radiation, but could also pick up anomalies in nearby space. He turned it on, watching as the display went wild. Electromagnetic fluctuations surged off the scale, far beyond any normal readings. This wasn't just some meteor or satellite gone awry. Something or someone was here, and it was far more advanced than anything Riven could have imagined. The object continued its descent, heading toward the dense forest that bordered his property. His mind raced. Should he call the authorities? The military? What if it was dangerous? But even as the words formed in his head, something inside him told him to go to it, to find out for himself. He grabbed his jacket, his pulse quickening with an odd mix of fear and exhilaration. The truck rattled as Riven drove through the winding mountain roads, heading toward the crash site. The air outside was thick with anticipation, the stillness of the night interrupted only by the sound of the engine and the occasional snap of a branch as he sped past. His mind raced, but he forced himself to focus on the task at hand. He needed to stay calm. He needed to figure out what this was, what had come to Earth. And he would do it alone, as he always did. When he finally reached the clearing, the scene before him stopped him cold. The craft had landed softly in the center of the forest, its metallic surface reflecting the pale light of the moon. It was unlike anything he had ever seen, its design smooth and elegant, with no visible seams or rivets. The air around it shimmered, almost as if the very fabric of reality was warping in its presence. Riven stood frozen for a moment, unsure of what to do. He should have turned back, should have called for help, but something pulled him forward, a curiosity deeper than any fear. As he stepped closer, he felt a strange energy in the air, a tingling sensation that ran down his spine. His breath hitched in his throat as he neared the craft. It was impossibly silent. No engine hum, no creak of metal, just the soft whisper of wind through the trees. Then, without warning, a figure appeared from within the craft. She was tall, impossibly so. Her silhouette shimmered against the background of the craft's glowing light, casting an ethereal aura around her. Her hair, if it could be called hair, was long and flowing, not quite silver, not quite white, but a luminous blend of both. It moved as though it had a life of its own, rippling in the night air like a liquid. Her skin, too, seemed to glow faintly, as if the stars themselves had kissed her skin and left their mark. But it was her eyes, those impossibly deep eyes, that drew Riven in. They were like twin galaxies, swirling with stars and nebulae, a depth he couldn't hope to comprehend. For a moment, neither of them moved. Riven stood rooted to the spot, unable to look away, his breath caught in his throat. The woman, if she could even be called a woman, tilted her head slightly, studying him with a curiosity that seemed both otherworldly and somehow familiar. "You see me?" she said, her voice like music, an impossibly melodic sound that seemed to reverberate through his very bones. Riven swallowed, unsure of how to respond. He felt as though his body was betraying him, his mind struggling to make sense of what was happening. He had always prided himself on his logical thinking, on his ability to analyze and dissect. But nothing in his years of study had prepared him for this moment. "You're real," he managed to say, his voice sounding small and unsure in the vastness of the night. She didn't laugh. Instead, she smiled, just a slight curve of her lips, but it was enough to send a jolt of warmth through his chest. "Real enough," she replied, her gaze never leaving his. The words didn't make sense, but Riven didn't care. He was standing in front of an alien being, one who had traveled across the stars to reach Earth. His mind was a whirlwind of questions. Where had she come from? What did she want? Why was she here? But before he could voice any of them, she spoke again. "I am Silari," she said, her tone calm, as though she had said her name countless times before, to countless different beings. "I come from beyond your stars." Riven's mind whirled. He had heard the theories, alien civilizations, extraterrestrial visitors, the possibility of life beyond Earth, but to stand here, facing this being, felt utterly unreal. And yet, the evidence was undeniable. Everything about her screamed of the unknown, of something vast and powerful. But there was no malice in her gaze, no threat, just a strange sense of purpose. I'm Riven," he stammered, still struggling to come to terms with the situation. "You're from another planet?" Silari nodded, a flicker of something like amusement in her eyes. "Yes, from a place beyond your comprehension. But I did not come here by choice." Riven took a step forward, his scientific curiosity overriding his fear. "Then why are you here? What happened?" "The craft malfunctioned," Silari explained. "I was caught in a storm, an anomaly in space. My ship was damaged, and I was forced to make an emergency landing. Now I am stranded." A surge of empathy washed over Riven. Despite the overwhelming strangeness of the situation, he found himself sympathizing with this alien being. She was far from the cold, detached figure he had expected. Instead, she seemed vulnerable. Even as she stood before him, an aura of otherworldly power radiating from her, there was an undeniable sense of fragility. "So, you need help?" he asked, instinctively wanting to offer assistance. Silari's eyes met his, and for the first time, Riven saw a flicker of something human in her gaze. Uncertainty. "Yes, I need help," she replied, her voice soft. "And I fear I may not have much time." The gravity of her words settled over him, a cold weight pressing down on his chest. Whatever had brought her here, whatever anomaly had disrupted her journey, it was far beyond anything he had ever encountered. But in that moment, Riven knew one thing for certain: he couldn't leave her to face it alone. He looked around, his mind racing. "Then we need to get you to a safer place," he said, his voice steady despite the whirlwind of thoughts racing through his mind. "I have a lab nearby. It's isolated. We'll figure out what went wrong with your ship." For the first time, Silari's lips curled into a genuine smile. "I would appreciate that." And with that, Riven's world, his carefully ordered scientific world, was thrown into chaos. The stars above had just become a lot closer, and the universe, it seemed, had much more to reveal than he had ever dreamed. The days following the strange encounter with Silari blurred together. Riven's mind was overwhelmed, caught between his deep-rooted skepticism and the undeniable truth standing before him. He had always prided himself on being grounded in logic and reason, But everything had shifted in the wake of that night. Solari was real. An alien, a being from beyond Earth, standing in his home and asking for his help. There was no longer any room for doubt, only questions and wonder. Solari's presence in his observatory was a constant reminder of the vastness of the universe, of the mysteries still hidden beyond the stars. Every morning, he would wake up to find her sitting by the window, gazing out at the sky. Her eyes, always so deeply unreadable, would follow the stars as though she were searching for something. Each time he tried to ask her about it, she would simply smile and tell him that her people's connection to the stars was far more profound than anything humanity could understand. But as much as Riven wanted to probe her about her origins and the nature of her people, he knew that now was not the time. They needed to focus on fixing her ship, on reconnecting her to the Veil, the source of her power as she had described it. For now, her celestial mystery had to wait. They spent hours poring over the remains of her ship, trying to decipher its alien technology. Riven's scientific mind was put to the test as he examined the strange materials that made up the craft. Nothing about it made sense. The technology was beyond anything he had ever encountered in his research. It didn't adhere to the known laws of physics, and the more he studied it, the more it seemed as though the ship was more alive than mechanical. Solari never offered direct guidance. Instead, she would watch him with quiet patience, occasionally pointing out an element of the ship's design that she could explain, but never giving away too much. It was as if she were holding something back, and Riven couldn't help but wonder what that was. There were moments when he caught glimpses of her otherworldly power, tiny sparks of energy that she seemed to control effortlessly. But each time he tried to ask her about it, she would change the subject, redirecting the conversation toward the task at hand. "Your world is so simple," she once said, her voice distant as she observed a piece of machinery that Riven had thought was a vital part of the ship's propulsion system. "But in its simplicity, it is also beautiful. There is a kind of purity in it." Riven had never thought of Earth as beautiful in that way. To him, it was a planet full of problems. Climate change, conflict, the unending struggle for progress. But when he looked at it through her eyes, when he considered her words, he began to see it differently. The way she spoke about Earth, as though it were a fragile gem in the vastness of space, struck him deeply. He found himself becoming more attuned to the world around him, its beauty, its flaws, its imperfections. And through that, his connection to her grew deeper. As they worked together, the hours passed quickly, and Riven found himself growing more accustomed to her presence. She wasn't like the cold, distant beings he had once imagined when he thought of aliens. Solari was warm, her smile infectious, and her laughter, a soft, melodic sound that seemed to resonate with the very air, was becoming a regular part of his life. Still, there were moments when a shadow would pass over her expression, moments when she would retreat into herself, gazing into the distance with an unreadable look in her eyes. Riven knew it was because of the veil, the energy source that kept her connected to her people. Without it, she was becoming something else. He wasn't sure what that something was, but he knew it wasn't good. One evening, as they sat together in the dimly lit observatory, a sense of unease settled between them. Solari had been quiet for hours, her usual calm demeanor replaced with an unusual intensity. Her fingers fidgeted with a piece of scrap metal, her mind clearly elsewhere. "What is it?" Riven asked, breaking the silence. He had grown used to her mood shifts, but this time it felt different. "I feel the pull of the veil," she replied softly, her voice distant, as though she were speaking to herself. "Every moment I am here, I drift further from it, and the farther I am from it, the more I change. I feel myself becoming like this world." Riven's heart skipped a beat. "Becoming what? What do you mean?" Her gaze met his, and for the first time, he saw a flicker of fear in her eyes. "I am not meant to exist here, Riven. My people, we are tied to the veil. Without it, we begin to lose what makes us who we are. The longer I stay, the more I lose myself." Riven didn't understand. "What do you lose?" She hesitated, then looked down at her hands, her fingers trembling slightly. "My connection to the stars. My power. My essence." Here I am just flesh and bone. I am becoming like you. She paused, as if weighing her words. And perhaps that is not a bad thing. But it is not what I am supposed to be. Riven's heart ached for her. He had seen glimpses of the power she possessed. When she had first arrived, the way her very presence had caused the air to shift around her, the faint hum of energy that seemed to emanate from her skin. But now he could see it. The quiet desolation in her eyes, the way she clung to the memories of her past life, as if they were the only thing keeping her tethered to her true self. He reached out, placing a hand over hers. We'll fix it. I'll help you. We'll figure it out. She didn't pull away, but there was a sadness in her gaze. I do not know if it is possible, Riven. I have never been this far from the veil before, and the longer I remain, the more I lose touch with what I am. The more I become human. Riven couldn't explain it, but in that moment, he felt something shift between them. The air grew heavier, charged with an energy that neither of them fully understood. His hand lingered on hers, the warmth of her skin sending a pulse of heat through his veins. You're still you, Silari, he said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. You're still the same person I met that night. The stars might not be close to you anymore, but you're not any less incredible. And I'm not going to let you fade away. Her eyes softened at his words, and for a moment, the weight of the world seemed to lift. You don't understand, she said, her voice barely a whisper. You have no idea what it is to be tied to the very fabric of the universe, to be a part of something so vast that it defies comprehension. And now, her voice faltered. Now, I fear I may never find my way back. Riven squeezed her hand, his grip firm. I won't let that happen. We'll find a way. Together. Silari's gaze held his, and for a brief moment, something shifted in her expression. A flicker of hope, barely perceptible. But it was enough to spark something in Riven's chest. A feeling he couldn't quite place, but that felt like the first glimmer of something beautiful, something beyond the stars. And in that fleeting moment, with the weight of her pain resting heavily between them, Riven realized that he had already become part of her story. She wasn't just an alien being, a visitor from the stars. She was something far more profound. She was someone he couldn't imagine living without. They were bound by something beyond the physical, something unseen but undeniable. And whatever the future held, Riven knew one thing for sure. He wasn't going to let her face it alone. As the days stretched into weeks, Riven found himself growing more attuned to Silari's presence in his life. She was no longer just an alien being, a mysterious stranger who had fallen from the stars. She had become an integral part of his world. Every glance they shared, every word exchanged, seemed to carry weight, like they were both tiptoeing around something unspoken, something powerful that neither of them was ready to name. Though Riven had always prided himself on his independence, he couldn't deny the way Silari had crept into his heart. He had thought he was helping her by offering his expertise, his resources, but somewhere along the way, he had become the one in need of her presence, of her understanding. In the quiet moments, when the hum of the machines faded and the night stretched around them like a blanket, he would find himself simply watching her. She was unlike anything he had ever known, a creature of the stars, bound by forces beyond comprehension. And yet, there were moments when she would laugh, her eyes twinkling with a lightness that seemed so human it took him by surprise. He was learning more than just the secrets of her ship. He was learning the depths of her character, the way her heart beat in time with the rhythm of the universe. One evening, as they sat together in the lab, going over more data from her ship systems, Riven couldn't help but notice how distant she had become. The faint glow that had once surrounded her was dimmer now, and her movements seemed slower, more deliberate. He could see it, what she had spoken of, the slow loss of herself, of her connection to the veil. Silari, he said softly, breaking the silence that had settled between them. She looked up from the screen, her eyes meeting his, but there was something in them, a shadow that made him hesitate. I've been thinking, maybe we're approaching this all wrong. Maybe we need to take a step back and figure out what the root of the problem is, not just the symptoms. Silari studied him for a long moment, Her lips pressed into a thin line. I have already told you, Riven. The veil is what connects me to my people, to my essence. Without it, Her voice faltered for a moment, her gaze dropping to her hands. I am losing myself. I know, he said, his voice gentle. But what if the veil isn't the only way? What if there's another path, another way for you to stay? You. The look she gave him then was intense, almost as though she was searching him, reading him in a way he couldn't understand. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, she spoke. You speak of things you do not understand, Riven. The veil is not just a source of power. It is a part of who I am, a connection that binds me to my world, to my people. Without it, I am no longer Solari. I am something else. I don't want you to be something else, Riven said, his voice low. I want you to be here with me. If I could help you, if I could find a way to reconnect you to the veil. He stopped, his heart pounding in his chest. He couldn't believe the words that had just left his lips, but they were out there now, raw and unspoken. Solari's eyes softened, but the sadness in them remained. You cannot, Riven. You are kind, but this is not something within your control. I do not belong here. I never did. Her words struck him like a physical blow. He had known, deep down, that this was coming, that eventually, she would want to leave. But hearing her say it out loud, with such finality, left a cold emptiness in his chest. But I don't want you to go, he whispered, his voice barely audible. I don't want to lose you. She took a step closer, her presence overwhelming in its quiet intensity. Her hand reached out, and for a moment Riven thought she might pull away. But instead, she rested it on his shoulder, her touch warm and grounding. You will not lose me, Riven, she said softly, her voice gentle but firm. But you must understand, this is who I am. This is the path I must walk. Her words felt like a knife to his heart. He knew she was right, that no matter how hard he fought against it, her journey wasn't one that could be altered by his feelings. He had always known the universe was vast and uncontrollable, but standing there, in the face of the woman he had come to care for more than he had ever expected, the vastness of it felt suffocating. I'll help you, Riven said suddenly, the words rushing out of him before he could stop them. I'll help you get back to where you belong. Solari's eyes widened slightly, and a faint smile tugged at her lips. You are determined, aren't you? I am, he said, meeting her gaze. I'll find a way. You don't have to face this alone. Her hand tightened slightly on his shoulder, and in that moment, Riven saw something in her eyes. Something soft, something almost vulnerable. For the briefest of moments, he caught a glimpse of the woman she used to be, before the veil began to slip from her grasp. She was still Solari. She was still the woman who had fallen from the stars, the one whose eyes shimmered with the mysteries of the universe. And that woman was still connected to him in a way that he didn't fully understand. There was a bond, fragile yet undeniable, that tied their fates together. He couldn't explain it, but in his heart he knew that he couldn't, and wouldn't, let her go without a fight. Solari, he said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. Do you ever wonder if maybe we're meant to be here together? That maybe this was always the plan? Her eyes met his, and for a long moment she said nothing. Then softly, she answered, Perhaps the universe has a way of bringing together those who need each other most. Riven swallowed, feeling his heart race. He was no longer sure if they were talking about the stars, or about something else entirely. The line between science and emotion, between logic and the heart, had begun to blur in ways he hadn't anticipated. He had always believed in the stars as distant objects, as phenomena to be studied and understood. But now, the stars felt like a bridge, a pathway leading him straight to Solari. I will help you, he repeated, more firmly this time. And if there is a way for you to stay, I'll find it. Solari studied him for a long time before nodding slowly. You are persistent, Riven, but you must understand, this is not an easy path. The veil is not just a doorway. It is a force beyond your understanding. I do not know if even I can return to it. Then we'll figure it out together, he said, his voice steady. You're not alone. She seemed to consider this for a long moment, her gaze drifting toward the distant stars, and then back to him. And in that moment, Riven realized that he had crossed a threshold. Whatever happened next, whatever journey lay ahead for them, they would face it together. The universe, vast and unknowable as it was, had somehow led him here, to this woman, this alien goddess who had touched his life in ways he could never have imagined. And with that thought, something inside him clicked into place. He had never been a man of fate. But now, he wondered if perhaps fate had brought them both to this moment, this crossroads, for a reason. And no matter what came next, he wasn't going to let her walk it alone. As the days stretched on, the tension between Riven and Silari reached a tipping point. They had spent countless hours trying to understand her ship's technology, trying to find a way to reconnect her to the Veil. But with each passing day, the task seemed more impossible. Silari had become increasingly withdrawn, her once vibrant presence dimming with every attempt to repair the technology that would restore her to her people. But Riven refused to give up. He couldn't. The thought of her fading away, becoming nothing more than a shadow of the woman she once was something he couldn't bear. He had watched as the light in her eyes slowly dimmed, and it had broken something deep inside him. He wasn't just helping an alien. He was helping the woman he had come to love. He had never expected to find someone like her. Someone so different, so otherworldly, and yet so familiar in the way she made him feel. She had become a part of him in ways he hadn't understood until now, and the idea of losing her, of letting her slip away back into the void of space, was unthinkable. One evening, after another fruitless attempt to decipher the ship systems, Riven and Silari sat together in the lab. The night outside was thick with stars, the sky endless and serene, a stark contrast to the turmoil that had taken root between them. Silari was quiet, her head resting against the console as she stared at the holographic display, her fingers tracing patterns in the air, as if she were looking for something, anything, to give her a sense of purpose. Riven watched her, his heart aching. She had been so full of life when they first met, so confident, so powerful. Now, she was just a shadow of that woman, her connection to the Veil slipping further and further from her grasp. The weight of her situation had begun to take its toll on her, and Riven could see it in every line of her face, every gesture. "I'm sorry, Riven," she said suddenly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't want to drag you into this. I didn't want to burden you with my problems." He shook his head, stepping closer to her. "Silari, you're not a burden. You never were. You've brought so much into my life, more than I could ever explain. I'm not helping you because I have to. I'm helping you because I want to." She looked up at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of sorrow and disbelief. "But I'm not supposed to be here. My people, my essence. They are all connected to the Veil. Without it, I am nothing. I don't belong here, Riven. I never did." Riven took her hands in his, feeling the warmth of her skin, the delicate tremble in her fingers. "But you do belong here. You belong with me. And if I can't help you return to your people, if I can't give you the connection you're looking for, then I'll find another way. We'll find another way. Together." There was a long silence between them, a heavy stillness that seemed to stretch through the very air they breathed. Riven's heart pounded in his chest, the weight of his words sinking in. He had never been more certain of anything in his life. There was no universe, no force, no distance that could change what he felt for her. She was more than just an alien being. She was the woman he had come to love, and that love wasn't bound by the stars or the Veil. Silari looked at him, her gaze piercing and unreadable for a moment, before something shifted in her expression. Her eyes softened, and a faint, bittersweet smile tugged at the corners of her lips. "Riven, she hesitated, as though searching for the right words. "I never thought I would find something like this, something so human." Her voice cracked slightly as she spoke, and Riven could hear the rawness beneath her words. "I never thought I would feel this way. Not after everything." He held her gaze, his heart open and vulnerable, willing to share the truth that had been building in him for so long. You don't have to be alone, Silari. I'm here. And I'm not going anywhere. She took a deep breath, her chest rising and falling slowly as if she were gathering her strength. Then, in a voice thick with emotion, she whispered, I don't want to be alone either. Not anymore. And with those words, everything between them shifted. In the days that followed, Riven and Silari worked together more intently than ever before. They knew the task was still enormous, but there was something new between them now. A connection that ran deeper than the bond of two people working on a problem. It was a bond of shared understanding, shared vulnerability, and shared love. Silari wasn't just a visitor from the stars anymore. She was Riven's partner, his equal, and together, they were unstoppable. As they labored through the final adjustments on the ship, Riven found himself looking at her in a way he never had before. The intensity in her eyes, the fire that still burned within her despite the odds against her, was a reminder of just how extraordinary she was. She was a being of light and energy, capable of things that defied logic, and yet here she was, choosing to stay on Earth, choosing to be with him. And as they worked late one night, the sound of the machinery humming in the background, Silari turned to him with a look of quiet triumph on her face. It's working, Riven. I can feel it. The connection, it's coming back. Riven's heart leaped in his chest. You mean? I'm not going anywhere, she said softly, a smile blooming on her face. Not yet. Not until we're ready. He stepped closer to her, feeling the electricity in the air between them, a current that was as powerful as anything he had ever known. He reached out to touch her cheek, his fingers brushing against the smooth, otherworldly skin. The moment his skin made contact with hers, a spark seemed to ignite, a gentle surge of energy passing between them. Silari closed her eyes for a moment, and when she opened them again, there was something in her gaze, a quiet understanding. Riven, she said, her voice steady but filled with a deep, profound emotion. I may not be able to stay in your world forever, but no matter where I go, no matter where the stars take me, you will always be a part of me. And with that, Riven knew. He didn't need to understand all the mysteries of the universe, or the distant stars that she came from. He didn't need to know everything about her people or her powers. He simply knew that they were connected, that love, real love, had brought them together. And as long as they had that, nothing else mattered. The stars might be vast and unknowable, but in that moment, in the quiet of the observatory with Silari by his side, Riven felt something greater than all the cosmos. A love that transcended space and time, a love that was all his own. And as Silari's connection to the veil began to pulse with renewed strength, Riven knew that whatever came next, whatever the universe had in store for them, they would face it together, hand in hand, heart to heart, with the certainty that they were meant to be. For Silari and Riven, the journey was just beginning.